Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville, your host. Tonight we have a special guest with us, Kimberly Roberts, the organizer of the March Against Monsanto in Columbia, South Carolina. We're going to be talking to her about a number of issues, about the event, and about Monsanto in general in just a few minutes here. We're also going to be talking about a number of other issues if we have time after the interview. But to begin with, I want to remind all of you that you can catch Truth on the Tracks here every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at ucy.tv. And the show is being rebroadcast now, I think, 6 nights a week at 1 a.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 9 p.m. Friday night, 5 p.m. on Saturday, and then again on Sunday night, Monday morning at 1 a.m. over here at ucy.tv, and also being rebroadcast on realitybitesradio.com. So thanks to everyone who's been listening and spreading the information about this show. We are growing. So again, if you're interested in my work, you can go to activistpost.com and naturalblaze.com. I write for those websites regularly, but if you're interested in my work specifically, then I'd recommend that you go to brandonturbeville.com to keep track of all of my work. That's the website where I repost all of my articles, all of the YouTube videos, all of the interviews that I've done, and of course you'll find an events tab and a tab for my books that are available there as well. So again, that's brandonturbeville.com. Now, again, as I mentioned, we have a special guest tonight. Her name is Kimberly Roberts. She's the organizer with the March Against Monsanto. She's organizing the march in Columbia, South Carolina. And the websites that you should check out, she has a Facebook page for the Columbia, South Carolina March itself, which is on Facebook, March Against Monsanto Columbia SC. So go like that and keep in touch there. There's also the March Against Monsanto parent Facebook page, which you should have already liked by now if you're a listener to this show. And, of course, you can go to the marchagainstmonsanto.com website to find information there, and there's also a website, march-on-monsanto.com, that you should check out as well. So before we go any further, Kimberly, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Brandon. I'm happy to be here talking about this. I wish it was a topic we didn't need to talk about, but I'm glad that you can help spread the word about it.
Well, I'm glad that you decided to come on the show, and I appreciate the fact that you're organizing this march. It's always a pleasure to talk to people who are actually active and not just talking about being active. So why don't you, I tried to mention some of the websites early on, and I think I didn't mention the date, but why don't you tell people about your march specifically, where it's going to be, when it's going to be, and exactly what time?
Sure. It is going to be Saturday, May 23rd, and we are specifically having ours at the State House. I actually have somebody beeping in on the other line, but it's going to be at the State House, March 23rd, on the front lawn, Columbia, South Carolina, from 10 a.m. till 12 noon. And we're just going to meet out front. A lot of cities actually there's 40 different countries around the world that are signed up to participate. This is a worldwide event, and actually more than 400 cities are participating. Some are actually marching through their cities. At this point in time for this year, we're just having a rally in the front of the State House. A lot of people are wondering kind of who Monsanto is, and I know if they've been listening to your show a lot, they would certainly know. But in case there's any first-time listeners out there, I'd like to just give a brief overview, if that's okay with you.
Sure. I was trying to interject about when where the march was going to be, but then I realized I had my mic turned off. So
oh, okay.
I apologize for the awkward silence there.
No problem. I have somebody beeping on the other line, so it's.
Well, I was trying to mention to the listeners that the State House is located right downtown, so it's fairly easy to find if you're in the Columbia area or if you're traveling to Columbia. It's a pretty prominent location. It's a pretty good location for these types of events. But please go ahead. Tell us a little bit about Monsanto and what they are and what they've been doing. Sure.
Well, and if any of your listeners want to go online, I don't always advocate people going to Wikipedia for information. It's not always the most credible source, but in this case, there's a lot of great information. So, after everybody listens tonight, if they want to go to Monsanto on Wikipedia, there's a lot of good information. But basically, Monsanto is a global multi-billion-dollar company. Their headquarters is located in the United States, in Missouri. And since their founding in 1901, they've had their hands in just about everything. Their product lists range from food additives like saccharin and artificial vanilla flavoring to laundry detergent to DDT and PCBs, Agent Orange, several prescription medications, bovine growth hormone, and now GMOs. It's actually pretty astounding the diversity of products that Monsanto has had a part in creating. And unfortunately, most of them are toxic and environmentally irresponsible. Their latest project are the genetically modified organisms, and that's where they are drawing the most heat, along with that and something I'll mention later called glyphosate. But basically, a genetically modified organism, or a GMO, is created when the genes from an unrelated organism, such as a virus or a bacteria, is inserted into a plant or animal. It's really important to note that this isn't anything that would take place naturally. This is something done in a laboratory that we've been, Monsanto's been monkeying around with. And there's a lot of implications for this when you start introducing something unnatural into the environment. It's going to start having some repercussions that couldn't necessarily be anticipated. As far as GMOs go, Monsanto doesn't really have a very good track record. Agent Orange, DDT, PCBs, they were all once produced by Monsanto, and they were once thought to be safe products. But, we later found out that they're beyond harmful. They've been banned. PCBs, product of Monsanto, is a different story. They were known to be highly toxic right from the beginning, but Monsanto just assumed that this toxin would be contained in the products in which they were used. But, leaks of transformers occurred, and there were toxicity problems near factories and all sorts of things, and this actually led to them being banned in 1979. So, here we have a company who's making food products, but they've got such a bad track record with all these other harmful chemicals. So it just seems kind of curious to me that a company would be doing all those different products. I don't know. Maybe some people wouldn't find that odd, but to me, that's kind of suspicious.
Yeah, it's difficult to point out a product that Monsanto's produced that didn't result in some type of major environmental catastrophe or degradation or some type of health issue. Exactly. I really can't think of one, to be honest. Maybe there is, but I don't recall.
I have heard, and I have actually not confirmed this, but I've actually heard that they had something to do with the creation of LED lighting. So, maybe that's one thing we can give them in the win column. But
well, that's been shown to reduce the ability of the eyes to perceive light at some point. It's had detrimental effects to the eyes. So I don't know if we can
there we
go.
Well, we've just proved our point, right? There's nothing we can think of. It's everything that they've done, whether they initially may at some point in time started out with good intentions, at this point in time it's evident that it's nothing but greed that runs them. We take a look at the environment, and everybody that knows anything about the environment knows that Agent Orange and DDT and PCBs have just wreaked havoc all over the place. Here we are 40 years later in Vietnam, and they're still having problems with things being sprayed on them and Agent Orange and everything. There's been some news as of late with the World Health Organization that is now, damning another one of their products, which is glyphosate. For those people that don't know, that's one of the major ingredients of Roundup weed killer. And, me personally, until I started hearing about these sort of things, I had Roundup in my garage. I don't know of anybody that hasn't used weed killer, on their driveway or, in their garden at some point in time, because everybody was just led to believe it was safe. But now, if anybody happens to follow Dr. Oz on TV or anything like that, he's kind of broken into mainstream media, and has explained how glyphosate has been linked to cancer. The World Health Organization just very recently, I believe it was in April, determined that it's probably carcinogenic. And, some people playing devil's advocate would say, well, probably carcinogenic. But what they don't realize is that's actually the highest labeling that they can give a substance. There's no definite when it comes to human cancer because we can't control the study enough. There's other factors that might come into play. But we do know glyphosate does cause alterations in human DNA, and they've also had plenty of studies proving that it causes cancerous tumors in lab rats. So, that's another product of theirs that's on the market.
You also have to look at the cancer rates that have skyrocketed over the last few decades, and I'm not saying that it's all glyphosate or even all GMOs, but you can't ignore those products being involved either. And one other thing about the glyphosate issue, I did an article's research a while back regarding the effects of glyphosate on something called the CYP450 enzyme. I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's an enzyme in the body that is responsible for metabolizing different types of pharmaceuticals. Many pharmaceuticals that are SSRIs and that sort of thing, antidepressants, Prozac, that type of thing. And a lot of people were concerned about how many individuals were having adverse reactions. Well, this is related. Adverse reactions are related to that enzyme. And it turns out that if you have, say, an underactive CYP450 enzyme in the body, that will increase your chances of having adverse reactions to the drug, whether it's an overdose or whether it's a side effect. Right. Well, the research has demonstrated clearly that glyphosate inhibits the activity of the CYP450 enzyme. So if you're on Prozac or on this SSRI and you're taking in glyphosate, if you're consuming it in some way, then you're much more likely to have a side effect from that drug.
Right. And which in turn, sorry to interrupt you, Brandon, but which in turn makes big pharma money because they just try to treat your symptoms with more drugs.
Absolutely, and
so it keeps going around.
You don't actually have to have a bottle of this stuff and pour it all over yourself to have a adverse reaction. And the average American diet is loaded with glyphosate because since Monsanto and its companies, similar companies, are so heavily using these chemicals with their Roundup resistant genetic modification, that sort of thing. They dump more and more of this glyphosate on it. Then the average person who's getting food from these types of companies, which the average person is getting, then you're also getting a heavier dose of glyphosate. And with 20% of the population on SSRIs and antipsychotic antidepressant medication, that's pretty scary.
And another interesting thing that's come about lately in science is they're starting to make a connection between gut health, your gut bacteria, your whole digestive tract health, and how it relates to your brain, and how it relates to your ability to fight off things like depression and anxiety. It's some very interesting new research that's coming out, and it's notable, it's something that needs to be pointed out that GMOs and everything harm your gut bacteria. And so that just doubles the effect. You have the problems like what you just mentioned, and then on top of that, we're destroying our healthy gut bacteria. So we're just becoming a very unhealthy population. And, at first they thought that particular chemical wasn't going to be harmful in small doses. But they're finding that it's appearing everywhere. It's appearing in breast milk. It's appearing in rain samples. It's appearing in fetal tissue. It's appearing everywhere. And it's just been an environmental nightmare, and it's kind of like the genie out of the bottle. They've unleashed this glyphosate on everything. I mean, I had to convince the homeowners association in my neighborhood not to spray it along the entire ravine behind my home. And I've had to take it upon myself that my husband and I are going to go down there and chop the weeds down every once in a while. But it's a case of what you don't know can hurt you. And it's quite scary. And then we have other impacts, not just human health. We've got an economic impact and the impact on farmers. genetically modified seed, which is sold by Monsanto, has a patent on it, which it seems to me counterintuitive to put a patent on life, to put a patent on a living thing. But what they've done is they've sold these farmers seed, and going against all farming practices of days gone by, the farmers can't save their seed and replant it the following year. They have to trash everything because it's under patent, and they have to rebuy everything from Monsanto all over again. And to me, that just, it sounds criminal,
Yeah, and this is all done under the justification, as is presented by Monsanto and a number of regulatory agencies, that these types of technologies, biotechnology, increase yield. But time after time, we're seeing that's not true. Right. You go to India, for instance, you can see that BT cotton, I think there's a BT corn. I'm not sure if that's the right delineation of the corn, but
yes,
these yields are actually much lower. In fact, it's causing farmer suicides. Actually, they're killing themselves by drinking gallons of glyphosate, but which tells you that it's
wow.
healthy, but
I had not heard that one, but wow, that's pretty telling.
Yeah, it's their method of suicide because they've lost their livelihoods. They've produced this corn and cotton that is just not producing to the levels that the traditional corn, for instance, was producing. They're losing all this money, they're losing their farms, and they have nothing else to live for, so they kill themselves. And a lot of these guys are actually going out and getting a jug of glyphosate or Roundup and just chugging it, and that's how they're killing themselves. But it's I say all this to point out to people that it's not necessary to have biotechnology like this to feed the world. It's not necessary, and it's not healthy. The problem is the methods that are used. In fact, Monsanto and corporations like it are part of the problem. The destruction of family farms and that sort of thing are part of the problem. But it doesn't increase yield, and it's not necessary.
Right. They've actually proven it destroys soil, mineral content over time. It destroys the quality of the soil, which then you're just going to have problem upon problem. And they've been absolute bullies to farmers. I like to use this analogy. It's like if you have a white home, it's a beautiful painted white house, and your next door neighbor decides to go out and paint his house purple. And the wind blows up some purple paint, and purple paint ends up on your white house. Well, Monsanto is like the purple house. Organic farmers are like the white house. And Monsanto, instead of apologizing to organic farmers for their seeds and cross-contamination with the crops and cross-pollination and everything, instead of apologizing to the organic farmer, they're suing the organic farmer for, quote-unquote, stealing their purple paint. So it's no different than that analogy. You've got your organic farmer, you've got your Monsanto, and the organic farmer in no way, shape, or form wants any of this GE, none of this genetically engineered crop. He doesn't want that on his organic farm. But, just because of pollination and the winds blowing and everything, he ends up with some of it, and he ends up getting sued. So it's absolutely criminal to me how Monsanto has been bullying. So, I will give them the fact that originally I believe their intentions were good, but they are so far beyond that at this point in time that there's no excuse for them.
Yeah, and of course we've also got to at least briefly mention the collusion with government. For instance, you have people like Michael Taylor who worked with with Monsanto and then went to the FDA and then went back to Monsanto, and now he's been promoted as the food safety czar.
Which, if it wasn't so scary, it would be laughable.
Yeah, and they say there's no rotating door, no revolving door in Monsanto and the FDA, but you can't tell it because you can see lots of people who've gone over to the FDA and Monsanto and back again. It's not just Michael Taylor. He's just one of many. Right.
Well, I actually learned about GMOs and eventually Monsanto because I myself had severe chronic health problems. Healthcare providers weren't, they were absolutely stumped as to what was wrong with me. And after thousands of dollars of testing over several years with no diagnosis, no relief, my husband and I, he's in healthcare as well, a different field that wasn't related to the type of symptoms I was having. But, my husband and I began researching my health on our own. And it was through this process that we actually stumbled upon information about GMOs. I'd never heard of them, and we didn't jump on this anti-GMO cause overnight. You read a little bit here and there, and then soon all those little bits of info you start to find paint a really ugly picture about GMOs and what they can do to a person, and that's how I was led to this whole movement.
Yeah, I find that that's the case for a lot of people, is that they're brought in because they've had health problems themselves, and they've been looking for answers that maybe the medical industry couldn't provide to them, and they got into maybe natural health ideology, and they turned around and looked at what is in their food supply, the most basic part of your health, and it's pretty disturbing when you actually take a look at it.
Right. There's an Ayurvedic saying that I really like, and it goes something to the effect of, without proper nutrition, medicine will not work, and with proper nutrition, medicine is not necessary. And I think we've become a society where we rely so much on taking a pill. You take a pill for this problem, it gives you this symptom. You take a pill for that symptom. There was actually a cartoon that we cut out of the newspaper the other day. I believe it was the cartoon BC, or I think that's what it's called, or AD. I can't remember which cartoon it was, but the whole gist of it was, a guy goes into his doctor and says, I have all these problems from the medication you've given me. I have this symptom and this symptom and this symptom. The doctor said, oh, that's okay. Keep taking it. We've got pills for those symptoms. That was literally a cartoon. And it's sad that it's gotten to the point where even a cartoon recognizes how utterly ridiculous our whole system is. And, I had mentioned to you before we did this interview that I really feel there are 5 phases that everybody who ends up supporting this movement eventually goes through. And I'd like to share them with you because we might have some listeners that aren't at that last phase that, maybe we can help them see their way to it.
Absolutely.
Okay. The first phase of all this, I'll go through them. I believe they're dismissal, disbelief, discovery, discontinue, and disseminate. And I'm going to explain them. The first phase is dismissal. We are so busy in our lives that unless something's put right in front of us, the writing's on the wall, and it's shoved in our face, we are usually walking around with blinders on, focused so much on our day-to-day lives of things we need to do. And we just, until mainstream media picks things up, I think most people are staying in that phase of dismissal. It just, if they happen to hear something here or there, it goes in one ear and right out the other. And it's exactly where most of America is, and that's exactly how Monsanto and other pro-GMO companies want to keep it. They want to keep us in the dark, and they want to keep us unaware. The next phase, I believe, is disbelief. As mainstream media starts to mention things, people start to filter in a few facts here and there that they hear. These facts are so shocking. I mean, it's shocking to think that we have a man-made chemical in our body that's everywhere that could be causing cancer. That's shocking information. And, a lot of people are in that disbelief phase of, I live in America. How could something like this happen in America? How could the FDA approve something if it wasn't safe? We just assume that if it's on the shelf and it's a product we can purchase, that it's going to be okay, that everything's fine with it. But, we think maybe something like this would happen in China or some other country, but not here in the U.S. And this is kind of like the denial phase. And most people, in my opinion, never leave this phase, or they even digress back to the dismissal phase and, the what I don't know, what I don't hear can't hurt me. But what we need is for more people to hear broadcasts like this and to do some research on their own and enter what I call the discovery phase. That's where they're actively seeking to learn more information. And at first, maybe they actively seek to learn more information to disprove all these shocking facts, because it's hard to swallow when you hear all these things. And, they start researching and looking things up online, and, you kind of stop relying on what the media tells you and what Monsanto is spinning. But once you hit this discovery phase, as I call it, there's a good chance you're going to keep going on to the next phase. I haven't really met anybody that's gotten really hardcore into this discovery phase that just doesn't keep going with this. The next phase, I think, is discontinue. That's kind of a call to action, that once you know this information, you discontinue the purchase habits you've had in the past. You discontinue eating fast food. You discontinue buying antibiotic and hormone-laden dairy products and, all these products are laden with GMOs. And, your way of being starts to shift, which is a great thing, because once somebody enters the discontinue phase, that's when they start to make a difference. Because what I'd like the listeners to understand is that every single dollar we spend as a consumer, it's casting a vote. And, if people buy more organic things and more non-GMO things, just because of the society we live in, that's what's going to get produced more. So as people learn and for themselves and go out there, I think it's going to start to turn the tides as people start voting with their dollars and buying things that they want this world to have. And then the final phase is what I call disseminate. That's where people want to get the information out because they know that once everybody hears about this and they start discovering for themselves that there's no turning back, that there's going to be such a demand for non-GMO and a whole anti-Monsanto worldwide thing is going to just keep going. So, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but to me, those 5 stages of dismissal, disbelief, discovery, discontinue, and disseminate, that's how I see everything going.
Yeah, I've seen that in a lot of people as well. I think you're right on with that. And again, this march against Monsanto, whatever your beliefs are in terms of what the solutions are to GMOs and the GMO problem. I mean, I'm personally in favor of a full ban of GMOs. Some people just want labeling. Other people just want to use the market. I'm not necessarily in favor of those two as full solutions, but certainly as parts of it I am. And but this march against Monsanto encompasses everybody. So it's more of a demonstration against the GMO presence and against the corporation, and it's a pretty big tent, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny. I had a friend say to me when I mentioned to her that I was going to organize the rally for this year, and she said, you realize you're not going to stop Monsanto. Wouldn't you just rather have a nice Saturday to yourself? You're so busy and, yada, yada. So I told her, I said, I'm not out there to stop Monsanto. I'd be a fool to think that me standing on a street corner with a sign is going to bring down a multi-billion-dollar corporation. But what I can do is if I cause one person to stop buying hormone, growth hormone and antibiotic-laden dairy, that's just a ripple. They're going to pass that on. Their children aren't going to be drinking that. They're going to tell a neighbor. And the more people, that's why the rallies and things like that, the marches are so important, because Monsanto doesn't care that we're out there. But what does matter is that we help move some of those people that are dismissing everything, or they might still just be in disbelief, moving them into the discovery phase, moving them to where they're going to discontinue all of these practices that have helped build Monsanto to what it is.
Yeah, and of course, anyone who's telling you, this can't be done, well, of course not. With that attitude, you can't do something if you're not doing anything. So the only way you can do something is to get out and do it, and that's what the whole country sorely lacks right now. But hopefully, it'll give a big shot in the arm to this country and to countries all across the world. I mean, you mentioned earlier that this is taking place in, you said, 40 different nations.
There's 40 different countries that I believe it's 38 to be exact. I don't know if we've gained some more since then, but I know in the past there's been 40 countries involved. We are on 6 of the 7 continents. I don't think there's anything going on in Antarctica, but we are in the 6 other continents, and there's almost 400 cities. And when people visit the March Against Monsanto webpage, there's a really moving video on there. It was so powerful for me in making my decision as to whether I wanted to go through and organize this or not, just to see all the different countries and seeing these signs against Monsanto in all these different languages. And, I sent a press release recently to my local area, and I told them, I said, this is not a Republican-Democratic issue. It's not a black-white issue or a gay-straight issue or anything like that. This is a human issue. Every person on the globe needs to be wary of this. Every person on the globe needs to do what they can do to prevent total takeover of GMOs.
Yeah, and we have listeners not only in the PD area in Florence and South Carolina and in the United States, but we've got them all over the world. So we've got listeners in the UK and Eastern Europe and Russia, although I don't know if Russia's doing a march against Monsanto because they banned it. So I don't know if they even need to, but
right.
So
well, and that begs the question. We've got all these other countries that are banning it, and here we are, supposedly one of the most advanced nations on the planet, and it's just, at this point, in my mind, it's just greed. It's just this revolving door and the greed that's causing us to be held back from really making a dent in Monsanto.
Well, tell us again the date, time, and location,
Sure.
and all your websites, Facebook pages, and that sort of thing.
Sure, okay. It's coming up pretty soon. It is Saturday, May 23rd. The one that I am organizing is in our state capital. It's Columbia, South Carolina. It's from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, and we are going to be on the front lawn. We've got the whole front area of the State House reserved. People can just show up. If they want even more information, they can go to our Facebook page. It's just facebook.com/MAM Columbia SC. We're going to have a poster-making party, a sign-making party, and things like that. People can just stop on by. And I encourage anybody everywhere who's listening to get on the marchagainstmonsanto.com and click events. There's a spreadsheet that's going to come up, and they can literally search by their country. They can search by their city and see if there's something near them. And, if there's nothing near them, it is still enough time that they can get some friends out there with a sign or two, just to move some more people to that phase of discontinuing those consumer practices that they've had all along.
Well, Kimberly, thanks again for coming on the show. You've been a great guest, and I wish you the best of luck with this march. And anyone out there who's listening who's organized a march, I wish you the best of luck as well. And for those of you who haven't organized it, then you should be attending. There's very few good excuses not to attend this thing. So get out there and let your voice be heard. Again, Kimberly, thanks for coming on the show this evening.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a limited amount of time left, only got about 20 minutes or so I'm going to try to cover what I can. I guess we'll stick on the natural health topic for now, because there's something that I want to point out. There's an article up at naturalblaze.com. It's not my article. It's by Heather Callahan. Jenna Elfmann stands up for parents' rights and vaccine choice. Now, I normally don't cover statements of celebrities and that type of thing, but I think this is important because it illustrates what not only celebrities, of course, but the average person needs to understand, which is that whenever you take someone else's rights away, you are essentially signing the death warrant for your own personal rights. And this is what apparently Jenna Elfmann has understood. Of course, she's the actress. She was known for Dharma and Greg. She was on that TV show years ago. But there is a bill in, I think, California called SB 277, and that bill would essentially disallow all childhood vaccine exemptions. And that bill did pass the Senate, the California Senate. And to be clear, there's been a lot of meetings and events that are speaking out against this bill. But Elfmann is a pro-vaccine person. She believes that vaccines are good and that they've been, I think, I don't want to speak for her too much, but that they've been proven safe enough to be used. She vaccinates her own children. But she is concerned that there's a law that would require individuals to vaccinate, because she's concerned that if that law passes, that is going to eliminate parental choice. So she's not arguing the science of vaccines, she's arguing personal choice. And she is supporting personal choice even though those choices may disagree with her own beliefs and choices. And I think that is what is so important. So go check that article out. It's important to congratulate people when they say the right thing, so positive reinforcement. But she has been apparently active in a media crusade, social media crusade, encouraging pro-vaccine people to come out and speak up for medical freedom, not come out and speak up in favor of not vaccinating, or come up speaking out in favor of vaccinating. It's not about the science of vaccines. It's about parental choice for parents and their children to make the choices that they have the right to make. She's been active on Twitter and, of course, speaking out at these events. So you can go see her statements there on naturalblaze.com. And again, I say this because it's important for other people to understand the same concept, which is, yeah, it may not affect me. In her case, it doesn't affect her necessarily because she's a vaccinator. She takes vaccines, so she'll be fine. Her kids will be in school, and in her mind, her kids are going to be fine and protected because of the vaccine. But it does affect her because eventually the laws that have taken parental choice away in regards to vaccines, that have said you as a parent don't have the right to not vaccinate your child, the state has the right to make that decision for you. Eventually that will come back on her parental rights. It may not be on vaccines, but it may be on something else. And it probably will be on something else. So she understands the fact that once you take parents' rights away for decisions that you don't necessarily agree with, that eventually your rights are going to be taken away for decisions that you do agree with. And that is that's the general idea behind a lot of other issues here in the country, right? Once you begin allowing people to be prosecuted or coerced or punished in some way for saying or doing or consuming something that you don't agree with, then you are essentially putting yourself on the path of destruction and losing your own personal rights. So it's time people realize that personal freedom is not just the personal freedom to do what you prefer other people to do. It's the personal freedom to make their own choices. And that means whether it's your medical beliefs, whether it's your religious beliefs, we don't need a medical dictatorship. We don't need a theocracy. So the idea here is to stand up for all personal choice, that as long as it doesn't harm others, you're free to do what you want. But we won't go on that rant. We need to talk about a few other issues. Now, of course, I've mentioned the article ongoing, South Carolina Sheriff's Department violates posse comitatus with Special Forces joint drill. That's up at Activist Post and BrandonTurbeville.com. That being said, we covered that last week, and finally some other alternative news media outlets have jumped on the bandwagon and have covered that drill. It is taking part in Richland County, between the Richland County Sheriff's Department and the U.S. military. It's supposed to go on until May the 15th. So this show is actually being recorded on May the 15th. If anybody is wondering if we're live, we're actually recording on May the 15th in the morning. So it went from May the 8th to May the 15th. And again, it was in the lower Richland County community near Eastover and Hopkins. It was in Elgin near Screaming Eagle Road. There were military vehicles that were going to be traveling in the North Richland County area near Monticello Road. The Sheriff's Department announced to residents in the area that they might hear explosives being detonated, they might hear ordnance being set off, they might hear shots being fired. They had Sheriff Leon Lott saying that the department's special response team, which is a SWAT-like team formulation that's becoming more and more popular in small town sheriff's departments as well as the larger ones, they were going to be working with the 3rd Special Forces Group. Lott announced that the Sheriff's Department was going to provide simulated scenarios for the military, and added that Richland County was an ideal location for training that they couldn't replicate at Fort Bragg, whatever that means. There was no elaborations to what these scenarios were going to be or what the training would involve. This is the second time that we know of that the Richland County Sheriff's Office have conducted training with Special Forces. They did this last year, and they were in that instance, they were simulating and training to raid farmhouses and engage in domestic raids and setting up checkpoints and engaging in chopper insertion. And you can go look at the details of that in my article, Local Police Train with Special Forces to Raid Farmhouses, Conduct Domestic Raids. So it's going to be taking place at the exact same location, or I'm sorry, I keep speaking the present tense, even though you guys are a little bit in the future because it's pre-recorded, but it took place in the same location as last year's drills. So with, taking into consideration the increasing number of military drills and joint military law enforcement drills taking place over the recent years, practicing roundup and disarming and relocation of American citizens, and then we have the really intensification of it in the last few years. It seems to get more and more open, more and more regular. Then we also have these Jade Helm exercises that are taking place all across the country and still are. It's highly likely that the drills in Richland County are the same category. And again, remember the last time they were conducted, they contained a number of these elements. So the military and police are engaging in these joint drill exercises. This is not in the tradition of posse comitatus and the American tradition, the separation between the domestic police forces and military forces. Now, one could argue that this is just training, right? This is not a violation of posse comitatus to train, but is it training or is it preparation? So that's what you got to ask. It looks like it's preparation. To me, you're preparing to do something in violation of posse comitatus. So we have arrested a number of people for preparing to commit terrorist attacks. So if you're training or you're preparing to violate the Constitution, I wonder what kind of attention that should bring. So let's look at another domestic issue here. This is taking place in Benton Harbor, Michigan, and we've had Reverend Edward Pinkney on the show before, and we've talked with him at length about his situation. Reverend Edward Pinkney was an activist in Benton Harbor, Michigan. He was fighting against austerity, the emergency managers of Benton Harbor. He was fighting against the Whirlpool Corporation there in Benton Harbor, which is essentially a corporate dictatorship. It controls the local government. They have come into Benton Harbor, and they come in. Benton Harbor is a very poor area that's been devastated by the economy, the collapse of the economy, gradual collapse of the economy, and of course the 2008 crisis, but it was devastated long before that because of free trade. But the Whirlpool goes into Benton Harbor, and they get a lot of freebies, right? They get tax breaks, they get, from the local areas. They also, I think, get water rights that other people don't get to enjoy. They have access to certain lands that they're trying to develop, I believe, and all of this stuff. They come in and they run under the guise of, well, we're creating jobs for the people of Benton Harbor. But the problem is that 98% of the people who work at the corporation there in Benton Harbor are not from Benton Harbor. They were brought in from somewhere else. So when they threatened to leave, Reverend Pinkney said on this show, good, we'll help you leave. We'll pack up, we'll get a truck and get you out of here, because they maintain so much control over the local oligarchs. Now, Pinkney has been fighting that for some time, and recently he was creating quite a stir in Benton Harbor. He had even launched a recall petition, a recall election against the mayor, James Hightower, there. And how it was going, it was hard to say, because what happened was that Reverend Pinkney was arrested on charges that he tampered with signatures, petition signatures. It was some type of forgery or something on these petition papers. And he was arrested on this. There was no evidence to convict Pinkney. In fact, the prosecution even admitted that. But regardless, Pinkney was sentenced to up to 10 years in prison on felony charges, although from what I understand, these charges should have been prosecuted as a misdemeanor, and that's what the sources that are representing Reverend Pinkney are saying as well. And again, the recall of Mayor Hightower, James Hightower, was part of a larger battle that Pinkney was fighting, and this is they were fighting for the people of Benton Harbor. And again, Benton Harbor is unbelievably poor because of the decades of economic decline, and then the austerity policies came in, and then the emergency managers came in, and of course you got the corporate control wielded by the Whirlpool Corporation. So the arrest and trial of Pinkney has largely been a political witch hunt and a public circus since day one. Right? When Pinkney was arrested, there was a SWAT raid that was launched just to serve him a warrant. They surrounded his home. They shut down the street. They told the neighbors to shelter in place. They had full military regalia, all this stuff. The sheriff's deputies raided the homes of petition signers. These are just people who were on the street, were asked to sign a petition. They signed a petition, and the sheriff's department raided their homes just to get them to testify that Pinkney had forged the signatures. And, most of them wouldn't even do that. But Pinkney's trial, we had a stacked jury. We had members of the jury who lied under oath regarding the connections to members of the prosecution and key witnesses in the case. Now, the listeners of this show will know full well that I don't like to play the race card by any stretch of the imagination. I do not like whining about racism where it doesn't exist. But Reverend Pinkney, remember, Benton Harbor is about 85 to 90% black. You're supposed to be tried by a jury of your peers, but Reverend Pinkney was tried by an all-white jury in a overwhelmingly majority black area. What it looks like to me, now whether you can accuse him of racism or not, but this is very funny, because if he's supposed to get a fair trial, how are all the people apparently from outside, unless they just picked all the jurors from 14% of the population in Benton Harbor? It's not really his peers, because Benton Harbor is where he was active in, and very funny, just very funny to say the least. And again, was it racist? I'm not gonna call it racist, but what I'll say is that this was a stacked jury. I think that's clear enough, and I think it's clear enough that Pinkney was in a kangaroo court. I think that's clear. When the prosecution was giving their statements, they actually told the jury, you don't need evidence to convict Mr. Pinkney. They told him that. And of course, you do need evidence. It's absolutely true that you do need evidence, but he told the jury that they don't need evidence. I guess it's jury nullification in reverse. But then we had Judge Sterling Schrock, who ordered Reverend Pinkney, after he was found guilty, to pay restitution to Mayor James Hightower for campaign costs he incurred as a result of the recall election. And in addition to that, Schrock ordered Pinkney to pay around $1,800 for neck pain that Hightower had experienced as a result of the stress of facing a recall election. So the $1,800 is apparently the estimated cost of the time Hightower had to take off to deal with the stress of the situation. So I guess he's charging Reverend Pinkney for Mayor Hightower's expensive massages. So I guess what we could say is that this is an outrageous ruling, but it's just not only evidence of the fact that courts themselves are entirely corrupt, but that the political dissent in Berrien County and Benton Harbor and Michigan in general and the country as a whole is under attack. Hightower's pathetic whining about stress from facing a legitimate recall election, that's merely an expression of another privileged aristocrat who became pissed off when his perceived authority was challenged. And Schrock's ruling is just, one more example of a court system that's working hand in hand with the local ruling class, with the corporate ruling class, to maintain the status quo of oppression and submission in the ranks of the general public in their districts. Pinkney's persecution, and that's what it is a warning to all activists that the system, whenever you challenge it, is going to do whatever it can to fight back and remove the dissenters. But it's also a lesson to activists all across the world, because when he was free, Pinkney led a movement to resist austerity and the mayor and the corporatocracy. Now, when he's in jail currently, he's appealing and fighting his imprisonment, of course, but he's fighting the conditions of the prisons and the prisoners that are in them. He's fighting for better food. He's trying to get a movement going inside the prison to get better conditions. So this guy is a fighter. He's not giving up, and whatever you put him, he's going to try to fight to increase the living standards and improve the conditions that everybody has to be in. So go check out my article, Judge Orders Activists to Pay for Mayor's Neck Pain, and there's a video at the bottom, which is a recording of my interview with Reverend Pinkney here on this show, and you can hear him tell his story there. Now, in the time that we have left, we've only got a couple of minutes, I wanted to mention a couple of, I guess we should say, random things. Well, let's save the National Bank question for later if we can. Just randomly mention that there is an announcement that former Israeli Prime Minister and former Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak has added another accomplishment to his resume. Now he's accepted a new position with a startup biometrics firm. It's called FST Biometrics, and Barak recently joined the board of FST after the company received a $15 million investment from GMF Capital. GMF Capital is headed by Mr. Gary Fagel, who is well-known Swiss investor. Barak will serve as FST's representative to GMF Capital on GMF's board. So we have these FST products really are a combination of facial recognition and behavioral analytics, and the clients of the company include governments and corporations. The founder of FST is Aharon Zivi Farkash, who is a former head of Israeli military intelligence. So we have clear Israeli involvement in the FST company. Ehud Barak obviously is most well known for his stint as Prime Minister and Defense Minister of Israel, but also his ability to pass as a woman during the midst of a military operation that saw him allegedly playing a direct role in assassinating 3 PLO figures along with other Israeli terrorists who assisted him. Barak has been a war hawk and a leader in the genocide of Palestinians, and I feel that it's important to mention that Ehud Barak's original name was actually Ehud Brog. Well, that's a Lithuanian name, and that was the name that his family held when they came to Palestine from Lithuania in 1932 to settle Palestine and drive out the local inhabitants and create genocide. So it's not a surprise that Barak would be pointed to a higher level position in a surveillance and biometrics company like FST, and it's not surprising considering that Israel has been a large proponent of these types of technologies in the past and currently. And given Barak's previous track record in the realm of freedom and human rights, it's certainly not unbelievable that he would be part of an organization like this either. It's quite convenient, though, that only last month we had Israeli Interior Minister Gilad Erdan introducing legislation that would enforce a mandatory biometric identification system in Israel. Now we have this law being passed by the Knesset, or Knesset, however you want to say it, in December of 2009, actually, and it was called the Biometric Database Law, and it mandates the collection of fingerprints and facial images from all Israeli residents, and as well as integrating these biometric details into domestic ID cards and national passports. The legislation also called for the creation of a biometric government database for the purpose of managing access control, identification of individuals, and to help law enforcement officials locate criminal suspects, what they call criminal suspects. The law was allegedly set up to curb identity theft, as well as the loss and theft and destruction of those current blue ID cards that they've got that have been issued by the Interior Ministry. And in a report that was submitted to the Prime Minister's office and to the Knesset chairman, Erdogan emphasized the importance of implementing the biometric system and said the transition wouldn't be immediate, but it would be gradual. This is what Erdogan told the Israeli News. It says, smart biometric records that cannot be faked will lead to the full protection of the identity of Israeli citizens. It will provide a balance between our duty to ensure the security of citizens and our duty to protect their privacy. We will promote a gradual transition to mandatory biometric documentation, end quote. So that first phase of the biometric identification system was implemented June of 2013, and since then there have been about 640,000 people that have volunteered to submit their biometric details to the database, according to Erdogan. So it's going to be interesting to see the role that FST plays in the implementation of that type of system in Israel. But the company's no doubt going to cash in on this global movement to install and enforce a technological control grid and surveillance society based on biometrics all across the globe. So we have this proliferation of biometrics-based technologies used for identification and convenience and security and clearance. FST is just going to get in on one of the lower floors of what's unfortunately probably going to become one of the leading industries in the Western world soon enough, including here in the United States. We're certainly moving in that direction as people care less and less about their personal liberties. So we've had a number of propaganda assaults hitting out, being fired against Bashar al-Assad. We've had claims of chemical weapons recently. No evidence that Assad fired these chemical weapons, but there is evidence that it's the death squads, because the idea here is that they're claiming that Assad, they found trace amounts of chemical weapons precursors, and that therefore Assad used gas in these remote villages out in the areas of Syria. The truth is, what they've done is a coordinated media campaign to conflate two different things. It's a coordinated media campaign to conflate the fact that the weapons inspectors found trace elements of chemical precursors to chemical weapons. So it's trace elements of precursors, not even chemical weapons, trace elements of precursors. And of course you can't launch chemical weapons attacks with trace elements of precursors. But separate reports are coming out and talking about chlorine-based attacks in other villages. And of course, chlorine is not usually used by national governments in chemical weapons. Assad has no reason to use those chemical weapons when he's winning. And the death squads have proven that they have used chemical weapons, that they have access to those chemical weapons. We also saw a propaganda campaign. We're going to talk more about this next week, but we also saw a propaganda campaign regarding the fact that Western media was reporting that Ali Mamlouk, who was the Syrian National Security Bureau chief, that he was arrested because he was trying to take part in a coup against Assad. Well, that got proven false within hours, because there was pictures of Mamlouk sitting with Assad in a meeting with the Iranians. And of course, the day after, Mamlouk and Assad appeared together, and only the Western audiences fell for that. The Syrians knew it wasn't true early on because they could see it in front of their face. So fooled yet again by the mainstream media, but I wonder if they're going to retract. I doubt it. We'll talk more about that next week as well. We'll also talk about the Donetsk People's Republic nationalizing banks and why we should do the same, why bankers fear nationalization, not ending the Fed, and we'll cover all that next week. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember the March Against Monsanto, May 23rd, and come back next week. We'll have a lot more information on the international realm for you. This has been Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. We'll see you next week.
Hi, this is Anthony Gucciardi, and I'm super excited to announce March Against Monsanto is coming May 23rd worldwide. Now, you're probably familiar with this grassroots initiative. Now, it's going to be happening in over 400 countries, and specifically, this is a grassroots, as in it's created by the people, for the people.
For more news, visit pigminenews.com.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.tv.